Hey everyone, welcome to tonight's show. So whether you find yourself staying awake at night, worrying about how you're going to start paying back your student loans when you graduate in May, or you're a millennial who has the mindset that you'll always have debt, so why bother paying it off, you're going to want to tune into tonight's show because I have Sheena Garcy, a senior coach from the Student Loan Doctor, who's going to give us some insight on how you pay down your student loans faster. So my name is Clarissa Rodriguez and you are watching She Rocks at College Live, a live show that happens every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on YouTube, where I bring together college women in their 20s and 30s to expose them to other women, other resources that are going to help them succeed not only academically but in their life. So let's get into tonight's show. Hey Sheena, thank you so much for being with us here on tonight's show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You're so welcome. So Sheena, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what is the Student Loan Doctor and what your role is there at the company?
So Student Loan Doctor, we help with anything that has to do with repayment. I'm the senior coach with the Student Loan Doctor. I went to Malloy College for my MBA and SUNY Albany for my undergrad, so I have my own share of student loans, and I understand how that impacts our lives.
That's awesome. So you've been with the company, you said, for a year and a half, right?
Yes, a year and a half.
Okay. And what is your role there as a senior coach?
I'm usually the first person you speak to, whether you're on a discovery call or moving forward. So my role in the company is to help you come up with a plan with your student loans, and then from there, if you need me to do the work on your behalf, I'm there, or just to give you recommendations.
Awesome. So one of the things that I want to ask you first off is how thinking about college students today, the ones that are graduating, the ones that reach out to the Student Loan Doctor, how do they feel about their student loans at the moment?
I feel like most students are overwhelmed. Student loans can be the biggest debt that you have, and they're confused. They're not too familiar what their options are, and they just feel like these are these loans that are going to be here for the rest of their life.
So they come to you wondering, is it even possible to pay them off, or how to even go about it?
Yeah, so is it possible to pay them off, how to go about it? And a lot are just upset because sometimes they didn't know enough when they took out these loans, and it's years later, and when they realize how much they borrowed versus how much they owe and how much they have to pay a month, they're just overwhelmed with that information.
Right. So I guess for some of the students who might be in college right now, so what are the typical student loans that you'll see students take out freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, all through college that they're then responsible for paying off?
So you're taking out your subsidized and unsubsidized loans, and then you could also have your parents take out Parent Plus loans. Parents take out Parent Plus loans because they want to do what's best for you, but you want to just think about it now because later on, it can mean that they have to pay a lot more money back than if you would have just took out those loans on your end.
So your parents are responsible for paying back Parent Plus loans?
Yes. So even though they're your loans, and a lot of students are the ones paying them, if your mom took out a Parent Plus loan for you, they're going to look at her income, not your income. So depending on how much money she makes, even though she's not the one paying, it's going to put you in a situation.
Wow, I didn't know that. So my dad took out one of those loans for me, so that's really good to understand because I didn't know that prior to this. But what's the difference between, you said, subsidized and unsubsidized loans for those who are not familiar?
It's just the way that they calculate your interest. So some you're going to be responsible for most of the interest, some of the government handles some of the interest. So they're always going to be separated. Even after you consolidate, you'll see unsubsidized versus subsidized.
Okay, so it just determines how much interest you pay at the end.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming the subsidized ones are the ones where the government's paying off the interest, and unsubsidized you're responsible for?
Yes, and so you want to just pay attention to that because if you're paying them back one by one, you want to pay back the unsubsidized one first.
Gotcha. So when we're thinking about paying off our student loans, what's the first thing you would say that we would have to understand about student loans before we actually start creating a plan to repay them?
For student loans, especially federal loans, you just want to understand that your interest rate, it's not going to be based off of your credit score or your income. They're just going to look at the loans that you had and the interest rate that you had when you got the loan. When you consolidate, they just give you the average of all those loans. So when you're paying back those loans, you want to understand which payment plan you're going on. The lowest amount monthly doesn't always mean that's going to be the best case for the long term. So you want to pay attention to what that monthly amount is that they're telling you and what that means in 20 years, 30 years. And just understanding that interest does occur daily on student loans. So if you can pay more than they're asking, it's going to help you in the long run.
See, that's something else I didn't know. I didn't know it accrued daily. I assumed it was similar to a credit card where, like, at the end of the payment cycle, that's when they tacked on the actual interest rate. So that's another thing that I learned today. That monthly payment that you're talking about, so what determines what you pay?
It depends on what plan you're on. With the student loans, there's a lot of repayment plans, and that's where people get confused. Sometimes the first time you get your bill, it could just mean a standard plan. So you want to see what your other options are, whether it's graduate, extended graduate, an income base, a repay, because you're going to have plans that are based on your income, and you're going to have plans that have nothing to do with your income. But it's really your specific situation, because it's also going to be determined on your family size, how you file. So it's what one plan might be okay for you might not be the same plan that your friend would have.
Okay. So what's the repayment plan that you see most students start off with the most, and then what would you guys typically recommend we would change to?
The most, and it's not a plan, is forbearance.
So for those of us who don't know what forbearance is, what is forbearance in your student loans?
Okay, so your forbearance is they're going to hold the payments for a certain amount of time, whether it's a 3-month forbearance, a 6 months, a year. Students get excited. You don't have to make a payment for 12 months and they just run with it. But at the end of your forbearance, they're going to capitalize all the outstanding interest and they're going to put it on your principal balance. So if you took out $10,000 and you have $3,000 outstanding interest, now your principal becomes $13,000. And now they're calculating interest off of that 13, not 10. And that's how you see your student loan balance increase so quickly. So I used to be a forbearance queen before I paid attention to this until I realized how much I borrowed and how much I owed. So my number one thing to try to push to students is forbearance is not a plan. Even if you're not, people will say they're not working, so they went on forbearance. You could get on a plan with a zero payment versus going on forbearance. So what I see the most is people going on forbearance and then they exhaust their forbearance time. You can only put the loans in forbearance for a certain amount of months, and that's for the whole entire life period. So let's say you have 36 months of forbearance. You don't want to use that in the first few years, and then now year 10 you don't have any more forbearance available.
What happens if you exhaust your forbearance?
You have to go into repayment, and if you're not making payments on the loans, you can go into default.
Okay. So let's say I wasn't on forbearance, which is not a plan. What's the next tier that you typically see students on?
Usually on a graduate plan because it's a lower amount, but it depends on what your balance is. Because you can be on a graduate plan, it might be lower, initially, but that increases every 24 months. A lot of students just don't know, so they're just on the regular standard plan that it comes with. Mm-hmm. So unless you reach out to your service provider and request to go on a lower plan, you might just be on a regular standard plan.
Now, a question about forbearance. So let's say a student graduates and they re-enroll, say, in a professional program or in graduate school. How is that different than... So how does the student loan company, I guess, treat the interest on that versus me just deciding that for 12 months I'm not going to pay?
So when you go into school, they're going to put you on an in-school deferment. So that's different than being on a forbearance. It won't cut out your time in the forbearance. It's just going to be you're in school, and the interest is not going to increase as quickly as if you're on a forbearance. You're not capitalizing that interest and putting it on top at the end. You're just on pause because you're in school.
But interest is still accruing while you're going through whatever program it is.
Yes.
Okay. So when does or should student loan repayment begin?
As you can start when you graduate, you can wait for your 6 months, but really, I would say once you get out that grace period, I would start before the grace period ends, because whatever you're doing to get into a new plan might take some time. So you don't want to start in November because your loans are coming out in November. Because if the application takes a few weeks, now you have to go into forbearance while those process. So a few months before your grace period ends, I would sit down, look into what loans you have and which plan you want to go into. And then from there, you can determine how long it's going to take for you to get into this new repayment plan. And if you're in school and you can afford it, I would still pay towards my outstanding interest.
So how does that affect your repayment later? So if I decided to pay while I was in school, how does the student loan company treat it?
It's going to help you because that outstanding interest that they might capitalize to the principal when you consolidate, it's going to be lower. So that's going to lower your principal balance.
And you and I, before the call, Sheena, were talking about refunds and how you get them. I think it's typically right before the end of the semester or right before the right after the ad drop period, you get that nice little refund. And I was watching a live by Sonia, who is the CEO of the Student Loan Doctor, and she actually recommends that students take that refund that you get and pay it back towards your loan. Why is that helpful, and why should students start doing it?
So she says sending it back because it's money you really don't need. And a lot of people take that refund as if it's free money, and we go, whether you're paying rent or going on vacation, whatever you're doing with it, in the long run, you're going to pay so much more for that extra $2,000-$3,000 that you got. Mm-hmm. So what she's saying is, no, just say no, I don't need that. That's extra. So it's going to save you later on of how much you owe.
Yeah, and no matter how tempting it is, I can't tell you how many shopping sprees I went on with that refund. I think I even bought I bought like a new computer at one point too, and I counted on it. It was like, oh, I knew that at like this point in the semester, I was going to get an extra $1,200 that I could just have fun with. It was like, I know
people that went to school for refund checks. Like, I'm going for my refund check. I need some money.
That is crazy. That is so crazy. Okay, so what are some of the common pitfalls that most students have when they start paying back their student loans?
I would think we've been programmed to think that student loans are supposed to be here for life, whether it's $5,000 or $500,000. People have in their mind that they're supposed to be here, so they'll just pay whatever the minimum payment is. And it's like, yes, it's great you're not paying that much a month, but what you're going to pay in these 20, 30 years could be triple what you borrowed. So I would say really look at your finances and don't treat student loans as if it's that bill that's just going to be here. If you could afford $500, pay $500, because I see people pay off a $60,000 car note in 5 years, yet a $40,000 student loan is here for 40. Yeah. I have people retiring, going on Social Security, and still have this $20,000 student loan. So it's just that mindset of thinking that it's always going to be there.
Yeah, and I think the difference between like the car that they're paying off really quickly and the student loan is that the car is staring them in the face every single day. Mm-hmm. I don't think I do because I'm like in a plan to like repay back my loans, but before I was in this space, I never thought about it. Like my payments came out automatically and I was like, it's going to get paid off in the 25 years that they gave me. You know what I mean? I never really thought about it, but it affects like everything. And like now I'm thinking, those $401 that come out and get gifted to the government could be in my pocket building wealth for me and my family and all the things that it is that I want to enjoy. So if anyone is watching live right now, if you have a question specific for Sheena, I would recommend that you just start putting it in the chat as she and I are talking, anything that comes up, and she'll be able to answer them at the end. So, Sheena, one of the questions that I really want you to answer is why it's so important for college students to be focused on their relationship and their mindset around their student loans while they're still in college. And when they graduate and they're starting to think about repaying their degree.
I would say it's important because it's going to affect your life in ways that you can't imagine. When you're in college, I think a lot just take out the loan and don't really think about what it's going to be like in 10 years. You're not 100% on what your income is going to be. You don't know where you'll be in 10, 15 years. And these loans that you're taking out right now could be causing you a lot of trouble when you have a family, when you're trying to buy a house or, buy a car. Your debt to income ratio might be too high because of student loans. So I think the main thing is getting in a mindset knowing that this is real debt. It doesn't have to be here for my whole life. I'm going to take out what I need for this degree, and I'm going to make sure that the degree that I'm getting makes sense for the amount of loans that I'm taking out. So even if you start looking at jobs that you want to get when you graduate, so that you can see what your salary is going to be like compared to how much you'll have in student loans, and make sure it makes sense.
That is so smart. Is there a place for students to, if they're in college right now and maybe it's their senior year and they're going to be graduating in May, are there any resources that they can look into in regards to finding out what their payments are going to be like when they graduate before they actually get that initial letter that says, hey, your student loans are going to start in a few months?
If you're about to graduate, you can always set up a consultation with us. You don't have to be completed with school. Can always go over the numbers to see what it is. But the main thing you want to go to is the National Student Loan Database because it's going to list any federal loan you have. A lot of times a student can think, oh, I have loans with Navient. Meanwhile, they break it down per semester. And if you went, depending on how long you were in school, you might have 20 loans. And 18 of them might be with Navient, but you might have 2 with Nelnet that you never even knew about.
Wow.
So you start paying these Navient loans, all of a sudden you find out you're in default, but you're like, I've been paying my loans. Mm-hmm. So you just want to make sure you cover yourself. So when you get out, the first thing you're doing is knowing exactly how many loans you have and who they're with.
And you said the resource to find that out is
the National Student Loan Database.
The National Student Loan Database. I'm taking notes, guys, because this is for me because I didn't know a lot of these things. Unapologetically K_Nicole says, the loans accrue daily! ! I didn't know that either. Where does it say that?
If you read those details, you'll see how that interest is building up. But it's in there.
Wow.
And if it's private loans, private loans are a whole nother world. Like private loans, they can have interest rates as high as 11, 12%. Usually federal loans are closer to 6.8% average. So that's something to look into.
So do you guys help with the private loans?
It depends on where you are with your private loans. If you have good credit, if they're in good standing, we can help you with someone to go speak to about refinancing them. If you're in a default stage, if bankruptcy is something that you'll be a candidate for on the student loans end, it just depends. But we really focus more on the federal side because private loans, there's so many options and they kind of, it depends on who your loans are with at that point.
Got it.
But I would always say if you have private loans to still call and reach out to them.
Okay, and see what they offer in terms of repayment?
Yeah, more than once.
Okay, more than once.
Go and ask again.
Because it's in their benefit, right? To give you a higher plane or something like that.
No, I can't afford that.
I see. You're giving us really tangible tips, which I really love. So if there are any students watching right now who might be interested in working with the student loan doctor, can you kind of walk us through the process of working with someone like you, Sheena, and where we can go to find or reach out or schedule a consultation or something like that?
Sure. So you can go to drpleasehelpme.com. Usually starts with a free discovery call. So that way we can see what your needs are and if we would recommend a one-on-one consultation. And then during the consultation, it's a 30-minute call where we'll look over your specific profile, give you recommendations, as well as looking over your credit report to see how your student loans are affecting you affecting the credit, and then what other recommendations we have as we look at the report that's going to help you increase that score.
Awesome. So I have a student who has a question. I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the screen so everyone else can see. But her name is Maggie, and she says, I'm a graduate student that already has close to $600K, and I'm really concerned about my debt. I still have 2 years left in graduate school. So what advice would you give to Maggie?
I would say if you're working while you're in grad school to continue to make payments on the outstanding interest. They might have you in deferment because you're in school, but that's not going to mean anything later on when you get out. So if you can make payments, and then it's also going to depend on where you work, what your career is in. You might qualify for certain forgiveness programs once you finish.
And then if let's say, for example, she didn't work, the only option is to kind of wait until that repayment, until you're able to start making payments on the student loan or towards the student loan. Yeah,
so you just want to keep them in good standing, and then once you're done, then you can see how many loans you have, if consolidation makes sense, and then depending on your financial situation and what loans you have, what the best repayment plan is going to be.
Awesome. Okay. Any final words for our students, whether the ones that are in college or the ones that are thinking or about to graduate in May, before we let you go and enjoy the rest of your night with your amazing son?
I would say now if you're graduating in May, that means that the loans are coming out of the grace period. So don't waste any time. Find out what plan you're going to get into. Forbearance is not a plan. Even if it sounds good, try to get an affordable payment, because a lot of times people think because they don't have the money, they kind of just don't want to deal with it. But with the government, it's like the less you make, the more they work with you. So even if you don't have that money, it's better to make a plan now, because when you start making more money, that payment's just going to be more.
Right. Oh, so good.
And then if you just started school, just take what you need. Don't be like me. Don't go on vacation.
I know, but it's the culture in the U.S. that they make it seem like it's free money, and you don't realize that, like, hey, at some point you're going to need to pay this back, and you think like, oh, it's 4 years down the line, it'll be fine, but trust me, when those payments start coming out, it's not fine.
Yes, I agree.
I actually have another question from a student. Betty, she said, is it a good idea to refinance your student loans?
It depends on your situation. If you mean taking your federal loans and refinancing them into a private loan, I don't always recommend it for most, because you're going to lose any benefits that you would get if you had a federal loan. But it also depends on what your credit is, how much you owe, and your financial situation. But you can combine them and keep them in the federal system, but refinancing them with a private company, I would stay away from that if you can.
And you guys can always schedule a free consultation with one of the coaches at the Student Loan Doctor. And you said the link is Doctor Please Help Me?
Yes.
Okay. .com. And how long are the consultations typically?
So the 15-minute discovery call is free, and then the consultation's a 30-minute call.
Okay, perfect. So it's a 15-minute, and it's just to kind of figure out, what's your question, and if you can actually help them. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. All right, Sheena. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your night to hop on this show. I really appreciate it. And again, can you just let everyone know where we can find more information about the services that the Student Loan Doctor offers, and how a student can get in contact with you to have you be their coach?
Yeah, so you could check us on Instagram. It's the Student Loan Doctor LLC. And then the website to schedule an appointment would be drpleasehelpme.com. And just make sure you choose Coach Sheena.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching tonight's show. Remember that we're here every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, providing you with amazing tips to help you to succeed, not only in college, but in life. Thank you so much for watching.
Bye.